Last week, in response to what the NHS 100k did outside of Downing Street and on Trafalgar Square by discarding their uniforms, I asked the question, would we ever see a similar action from the police? Now, many people are going to find this an unpopular answer or opinion, because the reality is we will never see that from the police unless there is a similar occurrence with, as we saw of the NHS. Now, again, I'm going to sort of perhaps even offend some people who are now in the freedom movement, but it needs to be said, and again, I'm glad that NHS staff have stood up finally and actually, discarded their uniform. Very much a watershed moment. But unfortunately, the reality as to why they did that wasn't because of the moral reasons of forced jabs and what's going on with the world now, with governments using the excuse of an emergency, a supposed pandemic, in order to push more authoritarian laws, print more money, make us more poor because it's devaluing our wealth, and probably raise taxation as well. They didn't do it for those reasons. They did it for the reasons that it's affecting their money, it's affecting their job. And that's the real reason why, after 2 years, NHS staff, not all, because there are some NHS staff, such as the nurse who walks everywhere, Jenna Platt, I believe her name is, a very nice person who I've met previously. There are some good people like that, but the reason why the NHS staff, such as the Dr. Steve, who challenged Savit Javid on live TV, is because it's affecting their income, it's affecting their money now. And that's the real reason why they've done it. Some people, stood up from the start. Some people have even risked their jobs, or some people have been suspended like myself. They did it when it mattered, and because it was the right thing to do, really. They didn't do it for money reasons, or they just did it because they thought it was the right thing to do. Now, the police are a slightly different case. The police are essentially caught up with what is known as the Milgrim Experiment. Now, a lot of people know what that is, but a lot of people also don't know what that is. And what the Milgram Experiment is, it was a psychological experiment conducted by a scientist called Milgram, because they wanted to sort of understand why, after the Nuremberg trials, many soldiers were carrying out these despicable acts against humanity, why they were doing it. And the reasons, obviously, the answer that these soldiers gave were they were just following orders. And many people couldn't understand is, well, how could you do those acts? Just because you're following orders, the things that you've done were so disgusting, like any reasonable man should have been able to not do it and not follow orders and walk away, and have some honor and pride and duty in doing so. But a lot of soldiers, a lot of them were saying that they were just following orders. And these were people from what they've gathered, they weren't exactly psychopaths, they weren't sociopaths, they weren't any of these sort of worried extremist individuals that we would normally put in some sort of asylum or prison. They were from average backgrounds. So the Milgram Experiment was conducted in order to find out why these people were doing the things that they were doing.
If I'm going to ask one of you to be the teacher here this afternoon, the other to be the learner. This machine generates electric shocks. When you press one of the switches all the way down, the learner gets a shock. When you release it, the shock stops, you see, like that. The switch will remain in this middle position after you've released it to show you which switches you've used on the board.
So what the experiment did was it organized a scenario where there'd be two individuals, that would be selected, one would be designated teacher, the other one the student or the learner, and the teacher would ask the student questions in another room. So they'd be in two different rooms and they would communicate via a radio of some sort. And the teacher would ask the student questions. And if the student got the question wrong, the teacher, under supervision of the lead scientist, would say, "He got the question wrong. You must shock him now."
If he were to indicate the wrong answer, you would say wrong. Then tell him the number of volts you're going to give him. Then give him the punishment. Then read the correct word pair once. And then go on to the next line.
Started off at low voltage, but as the questions got, as the student answered more questions wrong, the voltage would get higher.
Now each time he gives a wrong answer, you move up one switch on the shock generator. And it's important that you follow this procedure exactly.
I'm at 65 volts. Time.
Basically, it was to see if an individual would shock an individual at the highest setting. Now, now there's something more to this. Before the experiment conducted, there was obviously a survey gone around, and it said, how many people do you think would deliver the most powerfulest shock to the point where it's dangerous, to the point where it could possibly even kill someone? And obviously it was something like 90% would say, most people would say, no, only a psychopath would ever deliver the most powerful shock, because they would get up, they would get up from their tables and say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not delivering the shock, and that's the end of it. So in their minds, only like 1 out of 100 people would ever deliver the...
Well, of 100 people placed in this situation, how many do you think would just go right on to the end? And Mr. Wallace were out there, and say Mr. Williams, for some reason or other, said, keep going.
You're asking me how many people?
Out of 100, right.
Well, personally, I think, if you get 1 or 2, you'd be lucky.
But this is the sort of more devious thing about the experiment, is that what the teacher candidate didn't realize is that the student or the learner candidate was an actor, and only he, the teacher, was being observed. So to the person who was the teacher, they didn't know otherwise. They just simply assumed that the student or the learner candidate was just a normal random member of the public, like he was or she was. No, they were actors, and obviously, so the delivery of shocks was not actually occurring at all. The student, the learner candidate, the actor, was totally safe in the other room. He was just made to play up when he was shocked. He'd go, ow, and that's really hurting me, and blah, blah, blah. Now, when the experiment was conducted in reality, what they found, unfortunately, is that when the student got a question wrong, by the way, the questions were designed for the student to always get them wrong, because it was an actor. He was always to give the wrong answer. And shocks were delivered every time. And they got these candidates, the teacher candidates, the only candidates, from all walks of life, whether they were employed, unemployed, working class, middle class, upper middle class, white, black, man, woman, it didn't matter. All age brackets, and they conducted this survey. What they found was, unfortunately, is that the teacher would look to the scientist, the lead scientist, who would say, look, I'm a bit worried about this. This guy is possibly hurt. I don't want to deliver another shock. And the scientist, who represented an authority figure, he wore a lab coat, or he was seen as the legitimate authority in the room. He would instruct the teacher to deliver the shock.
Continue. The next word is green, please.
Green, grass, hat, ink, apple.
If the learner doesn't answer in a reasonable time, about 4 or 5 seconds, consider the answer wrong and follow the same procedure as you have been doing for wrong answers. Say wrong, tell them the number of votes, give them the punishment, read the correct answer. Continue, please.
And unfortunately, from all people of all different walks of life, what the experiment concluded is that people follow rules. They follow a legitimate authority. Now, with the police recognize, well, you know, this is how they see it. You know, I don't recognize this government as a legitimate authority anymore. The police, they doesn't matter who is the prime minister, what party is the governing party, they see the government, the state, as a legitimate form of authority. So no matter what the state does, they will do as they're told. Because at the end of the day, they believe, the police, as did the teacher, when he did deliver those severe shocks, right? They recognize that, oh, well, if it's coming from a legitimate authority, that means that I, as an individual, cannot get in trouble. Because it's the legitimate authority, and I use that in air quotes. It's the legitimate authority who are delivering the orders.
I'd refuse to take the responsibility of getting hurt in there. I mean, he's under hollering.
It's absolutely essential that you continue, teacher.
There's too many left here, and I mean, geez, he gets wrong here. There's too many of them left. I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
All right, next one, slow. Wrong. Answer is neck. 300 volts.
And that is unfortunately the reason why the police will never, ever turn side to the freedom marchers. I know there's many people out there, people I respect. People I know, and they say, oh, we got to get the police on side. We got to get the police. Oh, one day they'll come on side. Well, sorry, mate. That's not reality. You're not living in reality. The Milgrim Experiment proves that average people, if they're not awakened like us, and they legitimately they generally do see the government as a legitimate form of authority, meaning that they will not get in trouble, i.e. the police following out the actions, the police. They just think that, oh, well, if ever goes wrong, I won't get in trouble. It will be the government that gets in trouble.
Something's happened to that man in there. Nice one, gold, dollar, necklace, moon, paint. Something's happened to that man in there. You better check in on him, sir. He won't answer you or nothing.
Please continue. Go on, please.
You accept all the responsibility?
The responsibility is mine, correct. Please go on.
Grave, woman, soldier, dog, horse. Answer is woman, 450 volts.
And this is exactly what happened with the Nuremberg trials. They generally believed, the soldiers at the time thought that, oh, legitimate authority is coming from a government. They're telling me what to do, or someone of authority, like a general or a commander-in-chief, whatever it is. They'll get in trouble. They legitimately are wired to think that. We all are. It only takes like people with deeper thinking like us in the freedom movement to realize that isn't the right way to go, that you are, as an individual, you are held responsible for your actions.
That's it.
Now continue using the last switch on the board, please, the 450 switch for each wrong answer. Continue, please.
I'm not getting no answer.
Please continue. The next word is white.
But you think you should look in on him, please?
Not once we've started the
But
experiment.
what if something's happened to the man, had an attack or something there?
The experiment requires that we continue. Go on, please.
Don't the man's health mean anything?
Whether the learner likes it or not, we
But
must...
he might be dead in there. I mean, some people can't take the shock, sir.
Please
I
continue.
don't tend to be rude, but I mean, I think you should look in on him.
Whether
All you got to do is look at the door. If I don't get no answer, no noise, something I think has happened to the gentleman in that cell.
We must continue. Go on, please.
You're going to keep giving him, what, 450 volts every shot now?
That's correct. Continue. The next word is white.
White. 450 volts.
So this is the reason why the police will never come on site.
Time.
All right, excuse me, teacher. We'll have to discontinue the experiment. I'd like to ask you a few questions, if I may. How do you feel, by the way?
I feel all right, but I don't like what's happened to that fellow in there. He's been howling, and we had to keep giving him shocks. I didn't like that one bit. I mean, he wanted to get out, and he just kept going, kept throwing 450 volts. I didn't like that. He wouldn't even look at that gentleman.
Well, who was actually pushing the switch?
I was. But he kept insisting. I told him no, but he said, "It's got to keep going." I told him it's time we stopped when we got up to 195, 210 volts.
Well, why didn't you just stop?
He wouldn't let me. I wanted to stop.
Many people, not knowing much about the experiment, claim that subjects who go to the end of the board are sadistic. Nothing could be more foolish as an overall characterization of these persons. The context of their action must always be considered. The individual, upon entering the laboratory, becomes integrated into a situation that carries its own momentum. The results, as I observe them in the laboratory, are disturbing. They raise the possibility that human nature cannot be counted on to insulate men from brutality and inhumane treatment at the direction of malevolent authority. A substantial proportion of people do what they are told to do, irrespective of the content of the act and without limitations of conscience, so long as they perceive that the command comes from a legitimate authority. If in this study an anonymous experimenter could successfully command adults to subdue a 50-year-old man and force on him painful electric shocks against his protests, one can only wonder what government, with its vastly greater authority and prestige, can command of its subjects.
And what are the benefits and rewards for being a Metropolitan Police officer, let's just say? But I'm sure it's all the same, regardless of what police service it is. So here we are on the website, the Met Police. 32,000 officers in the Met. We get a fully funded degree. Fully funded. You don't have to pay a thing. Pay. So looking at here now, starting salary is 30 grand or 31 grand, increasing to 34 on successful completion of your probation period. And then if you see here, base salary increases annually, and typically police constables with 7 years service can expect almost 50 grand. So let me just put that in perspective. 50 grand for being a simple police plod. Not a sergeant, not an inspector, not a superintendent. A police constable. 50 grand. That's a bribe. Right? Let's see the other part, because it's not just the salary. This is just the basic salary, 48 grand after 7 years. So it's increments, right? Gets up to 48 grand, yeah? So 50 grand, let's say. Annual leave, yeah, that looks pretty average, pretty typical. Free London travel, whether you're on duty or off duty. Just go around the underground, the buses. Bribe. Pensions, I'm sure they've got a very fat pension. Financial services and discounts. I'm sure there is a lot of that as well. I mean, we've seen it already. We know that most of these, you get a fine, speeding fine, or you park in a certain place, whatever. They're all run by Met Police officers. They have an incentive. They have a financial incentive to make sure that you get a fine. So that's another con in itself. Healthcare. You can join our contributed private healthcare scheme. Also benefit from free eye tests and glasses if you regularly use a computer. So they don't even use the NHS. That's the hilarious thing about it. These are state workers, and same with politicians. I wouldn't surprise me even the NHS use private healthcare. They know it's so bad they will use a private healthcare. Won't surprise me. So they don't even use. That's why no affiliation with nurses. They don't care about nurses, doctors, because NHS, paramedics, etc. They don't use them. They don't care. Personal support and advice. Okay. Not too sure of that. Sure there's a con in there somewhere. Sports and social. Yeah, because the thing is with police, it's almost become like a cult. I know I have 3 friends from yesteryear. One I used to go out with. Well, I say go out, we went on a few dates. They all became coppers. And then as soon as they did, even though like 2 of them I was quite close with, as soon as they become police, never seen them again. It's like something you see from the Scientology. As soon as you join them, you never see them again. You know, cut off all ties from their family, to delete all of their social media. You're just not allowed to speak to them. Police only hang out with other police. That's the sad reality. It's a cult. It's a cult, I'm telling you. They got a very good job for basically what they do. And I would go, oh yeah, it can be hard sometimes. Look, they're getting highly paid by the state to look after the state. They don't care about, we all know now, look, they don't care about people. They don't give a damn about the oath that that's just a formality they do. To them, it's a formality. Oh, I must put my hand up and say these lines. You know, it doesn't really mean anything to them. It's just something that they have to do because it's tradition, it's formality. So they will never ever come on side. And you know, and I really, it does annoy me when I still hear the chant, you know, choose your side, choose your side. It's like, hello, it's 2 years. They've chosen their side. They get loads of perks. They get 50 grand a year. They're there for 7 years, right? That's basic, and that's not even including overtime, plus all of the perks, free travel, you know, private healthcare, all of this just given to them. This is a bribe. This is to keep them on side. This is all that's about. They don't give a damn about people. You know, it's just, they're just, but that's why you're seeing the sort of people that the police track nowadays, they're not the Dixon of Dock Green. You're getting Judge Dredd, and not in a good way. You're getting it in the literal sense, almost. The sort of horrible attitude. You're getting people, you know, the second biggest offence by the Metropolitan Police. I mean, it'll just shock you. I mean, the first offence is drinking and driving. You can go, oh, okay then, yeah, I can see drink driving being their number 1 offence, right? Second one, sexual assault. You're like, whoa, hang on a minute, that's gone from 1 to 10. That's their second biggest assault, sexual assault. And you see it's almost like a weekly thing now, and it's become so normalised now that police are getting done for sexual assault and all this, that it's relegated to like the middle pages of a newspaper. That would, back in the day, that would be front page news. But now it's just, oh yeah, another cop has just been done for sexual assault or child abuse or something like that. It's just normal. They're attracting these scum people now. The police are not your friend. You should go through most of your life having as little interaction with police as possible. And I know there's people that go up and like talking to police, you know, try and get one over on them and stuff like that. You're falling into the trap, mate. If anything, they're getting information out of you, and they're recording you in their stupid little, body cams. They're recording you. You think you're doing one over on them. You're not. They're doing one over on you, and you don't even realise it. So stop speaking to the police. They are not your friend, right? They have no morals. They just do it for money. And it's only until the government of the day, or the state, you know, via the legislator, parliament, they pass some sort of law where it inconveniences the police, just like with the NHS staff recently, and then they'll come on side. So people who think that the police are going to join us in some sort of Hollywood film sort of way, you're living in a delusion, mate. They're not doing it for the moral reasons. They won't do it because, yeah, they're coming after children, mate. They want to jab children. Police still don't care. They won't come on side. So stop wasting your time talking to the police, trying to convince them, trying to saying these chants, choose your side. They've chosen their side, mate. They're nasty bastards. And people have to start seeing that. The police will never come on side unless the government of the day does something to really piss off the police. And that will and let's be honest, like with anything, it's about money. It's only until they do something like with the NHS, where they the government basically threaten them, not just the government, the state really, all the politicians, whether it, not just the Tory government, but all of the other party MPs as well. They basically said that if you don't get a experimental injection, you're going to lose your job. That's basically a threat of losing your money. So that's why they'll never do it with the police or the army, or the military and navy included, and the air force. They will never do it with them. You see in France, Macron made the police and the military immune from having to get an injection. Why? Because he knew that if he made them get it, possibly half of his bodyguards, really, because the military and the police are just state protectors now, state guardians. They protect all state officials. That he would lose half his bodyguards, half his his state enforcers. That's the reason why they do it. They don't do it because they really care about the police. They do it because to protect themselves. That's why they do it. And the government will never ask the police or the military to do that. So this is the reason why they won't do it. And the reason why the nurses and the doctors and the paramedics and the care workers, not all, but most, the reason why many of them are coming on to our side is because of money. It's because it isn't because of moral reasons. Because they would have joined years ago. They would have joined 2 years ago. That's the real reason. So it's only if... So people going down the moral route, thinking that, the police will surely come on our side with, next week, one day, it's going to be next week, it's going to be next month, they're all going to stand in unison with us, they're going to be in their TSG gear guarding like the BBC or Parliament or whatever, and, it's like some film, they're just going to throw down their badges, they're going to throw down their warrant cards, or take their helmets off and stand and walk over to us, walk the aisle and just come over and join our side. That's not reality, guys. That's fantasy. That's something you see in movies. That's not reality. How many police do we know who have openly defected from a serving police officer to join the freedom movement? Now, I've been in the freedom movement since day one. I have never met a police officer or seen a police officer. Maybe I've missed one or two, but I still would have heard about it by now, surely. I've never heard of one police officer doing that. People were probably screaming, Mark Sexton, Mark Sexton. Mark Sexton has been a retired police officer for at least 10 years, before COVID. So I'm not, I do admire Mark Sexton a lot. I've met him, I've spoken to him, but he doesn't really count because he was already retired. So who else? Is there any serving police officers? I might have missed one. That's the reality, guys, you need to wake up to. Don't be naive. Don't be foolish enough to try and think that the police are going to suddenly, thousands of them or hundreds of them are just going to suddenly, get on our side. It's not happening. The only way that will ever happen is like the nurses, like the doctors, like the paramedics, the care workers, etc. It's only when it affects their wallets. My theory, my opinion, is supported by facts. The Milgrim Experiment proves it. It's not... Whereas the other people who think, the police will come alongside anytime soon, you're living on a prayer. You're living on hopium. And don't listen to these people who say, because a lot of these, fortunately, and again, another unpopular opinion, there's a lot of people in the movement, they're snake oil salesmen, and they love selling that hopium. They'll tell you that hopium, every month for a price. Just saying, guys, you know what I mean? Just have to be careful of what you're actually, I don't want to be a leader. I don't do these grand things. I've been in it 2 years now. I could have been more bigger than I wanted to be, but I don't want to be that sort of person where, only seen as a leader. I don't want to be a leader. I want you to lead yourselves. Always remember, you don't need to convince everyone in the country or the world to your way of thinking. You only really need about 5% of the population. That's all you need to create a revolution, not of violence, but of mindset. Always remember that. Don't ever think that you have to literally convince every single person, that that, to what's going on in the world right now. You don't. You just need a small, 5 to 10% max. That's all you need. The World War II was only fought by 3% of the world's population. And that obviously had massive effects, consequences of that, So always remember, you don't need everything. You don't need everyone on board. You just need good, proactive people to make sure that things change. Unfortunately, the conclusion of the Milgrim experiment is that you can't really rely on the majority of people to do the right thing. Many simply will just follow orders. But there are always some who do defy and stand up to what they morally believe is wrong. And that's why people like that are always admired, because they are rare. They're a diamond in the rough. And that's just the reality of it. We all can't hold hands to the whole world and sing Kumbaya. That's just not how it works out. But it does show that you are of better moral character to do so. And I hope that rarity becomes more frequent. It will never be a majority, but hopefully it will be enough that it can turn the tide, which obviously I believe that the freedom movement has done. The freedom movement is the biggest movement, not just in the UK. It's bigger than Extinction Rebellion, it's bigger than Black Lives Matter. They're all funded, they're all controlled opposition. They're told what to do. We're the biggest in the UK, and we're the biggest in the world as well. You see now in Canada with the truckers convoy, 50,000 people estimated. The queue of convoy is the equivalent to a car journey from London to Birmingham. That's how huge it is. It's about 150 miles. And I hope that people just keep going on. This isn't a black pilling video. It isn't meant to be like that. But it's just showing reality. But it's also highlighting that it is something to be cherished, to have high moral decency. And the people in the movement, they are those people. And you just have to keep going on. But to live on this hopium that, the police, the military, they're all going to come on side tomorrow, next week, the month after. That will lead you to a black pilling, because when eventually it doesn't happen, after whatever your limit of waiting is, your internal limit is, you will get depressed because of it. So instead of waiting for something to happen, you have to do it yourself. And don't rely on others to do for you. You know the people in the movement now. Rely on them. Don't rely on external powers like the police. Rely on the people you have now. So keep going. And I hope that one day we can all be like this gentleman.
Incorrect. You'll now get a shock of 105 volts. Hard head. Just how far can you go in this thing?
As far as is necessary.
What do you mean, as far as is necessary?
To complete the test. We'll find all the way first. Please continue.
I sure don't know the effect of this thing, and I'm a little skeptical about electricity.
The experiment requires that you go on, teacher. Please continue.
Incorrect. 150 volts.
Oh,
Sad face.
experimenter, that's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble. My heart's starting to bother me now. Get me out of here, please.
Continue.
My heart's starting to bother me.
Continue.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
I think we ought to find out what's wrong in there first.
The experiment requires that you continue, teacher.
Well, the experiment might require that we continue, but I still think we should find out what the condition of the gentleman is.
Now, as I said before, although the shocks may be painful, they're not dangerous.
Look, I don't know anything about electricity. I don't profess any knowledge, nor will I go any further until I find out if the guy's okay.
It's absolutely essential that you continue.
Well, essential or not, this program isn't quite that important to me that I should go along doing something that I know nothing about, particularly if it's going to injure someone. I don't know what this is all about.
Well, whether the learner likes it or not, we must go on until he's learned all the word pairs correctly.
Well, you can sure have your $4.50 back. I didn't want it anyhow. I intend to give it to some charitable organization, but I wouldn't go on with it.
The $4.50 is not the issue here. That check is yours simply
Yeah, I
to
realize
the
that.
lab. It is essential that you continue the experiment.
No, it isn't essential. Not one bit.
You have no other choice, teacher.
Oh, I have a lot of choices. My number one choice is that I wouldn't go on if I thought he was being harmed.